Shawn Pinkston is a former prosecutor, a current lawyer, and a family man. And now he wants to represent District 1 on Charleston City Council this fall. I speak exclusively with Shawn for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Shawn Pinkston.
Quintin, Washington.
How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again.
Well, likewise.
Yeah.
I guess it was almost 2 years ago since the last time I saw you.
It may have been during a previous race.
Right. You were running for House District 89.
I was running in the special election
Right.
that Nancy Mace wound up prevailing in the special election in the Republican primary. And then she went on to win the general election as well.
Right. And now you're here because you have some exciting news to tell many people. You are actually running for Charleston City Council's District 1 seat, which is currently held by Daniel Island resident and banker Gary White, who has served the post, I believe, since 2008. And I know that you said this recently to the Daniel Island News. You said this, quote, "It's critical we have a member on City Council who will strive to find solutions to our growing traffic woes, our crumbling roads and bridges, and the continued flooding of downtown." You also said this in the press release, quote, over the coming months, I plan to attend neighborhood meetings, meet with business owners, and knock on doors to directly seek input from residents. It is time your opinion is sought and your voice is heard by our city leaders. I know that, I believe, 4 years ago you ran. Tell me why Shawn Pinkston, why Charleston City Council again?
The public service to me is very important. It is a component of my core that I believe in strongly. When I was 19 years old, I dropped out of college to enlist in the United States Army. When I was in law school and 9/11 happened, I volunteered for active duty, sought a commission, and was given a commission again in the United States Army. Since I left the United States Army, I've continued to try to improve my community. So I just believe strongly in public service. I believe strongly in trying to improve your community. In City Council, there's no better position in my mind in which you can directly impact your community other than being on City Council. That includes, streets, making sure that they're paved and not full of potholes, replacing bridges that need to be replaced, working on traffic congestion, traffic lights, things of that nature. Those are issues that directly impact us here in Charleston. Those are the issues that we all deal with on a daily basis. Downtown flooding continues to be a problem. Whenever we get a heavy rain or we get a high tide coupled with the rain, we get flooding downtown. So these are issues that continue to face us, and they can only be solved when you have a collaborative approach on City Council where members of City Council are working together to try to solve these major problems. And you also have to have collaboration with the surrounding elected officials, North Charleston, right. Mount Pleasant, those, as well as Charleston County, just to make sure that we can work together to solve these issues.
You talk about, obviously, the approach on City Council. What is that approach like right now in your mind?
City Council right now, from what I can tell, there's obviously some disagreement between the mayor and members of City Council. You have various City Council members considering running against Mayor Tecklenburg. So just from an outsider looking in, you can tell that there's some dysfunction, if you will, between the mayor and members of City Council, just based on who's announced, who's running, who's supporting who in that mayor's race. My goal will be to work with whoever is the next mayor, to work with all other members of City Council, and to work together to try to solve the problems that we have. And that means every community in the area, every community in Charleston, whether it's west of the peninsula or east of the peninsula, is treated equally, and that the city makes sure that those areas are also included in budget expenditures, the expenditure of tax dollars, for example, tourist dollars, not just going to downtown, but making sure that they go to places like Daniel Island, which has MUSC Stadium, which has the Volvo Car Stadium. Residents on Daniel Island and the tourists that come to those two venues pay the same 2% tax that the tourists pay when they come to downtown. So some of that money ought to come back to Daniel Island to help build our crumbling or rebuild our crumbling bridges, and to help repave those roads that access those tourist destinations. So my goal would be to work with all of my fellow city council members and work with the mayor. Let's get together, let's find ways to solve the problems, and then let's implement the policies that will indeed solve these problems.
How much money is coming back to Daniel Island from the city of Charleston right now in your mind?
Well, it's hard to say because it's not entirely broken down when you look at the budget. So when you look at it, it's hard to determine how much money, for example, was collected just from Daniel Island.
Okay.
Now, there are capital expenditures that are being made on Daniel Island to include the Daniel Island Recreation Center, which is a major funding project, and the city has allocated dollars to that. And then if you look at the budget, the expenditures are broken down. But in terms of, I've been asked that, how can you determine how much money Daniel Island pays and then how much money Daniel Island receives? You can see some of the line by expenditures, but it's hard to say how much money is collected from any community directly within the city when you just look at the budget.
And I know earlier you talked about obviously crumbling bridges. I want to take you to Daniel Island Drive. Obviously, you want, if elected, want that to be replaced as one of the failing bridges. How long has that been an issue?
When you come onto Daniel Island from Plymouth Ferry, so that's the main area that I'm talking about, and part of that road is maintained by the county. So Berkeley County, using the penny sales tax, repaved the section of that road right up to where the city line is. Once you get to that city line part, you hit one of the bridges. That bridge is just full of potholes. Then there's another bridge right down the street before you get to Black Bottom.
Right.
That bridge is the one that's structurally unsound, where they had to put a steel plate on it to make it safe for traffic. Then you continue to go down Daniel Island Drive to get to Fairchild Drive there on Daniel Island, and that's full of potholes. So you can tell a big difference from where the county maintenance ends and where the city maintenance ends. And that's been a problem on Daniel Island for as long as I can recall. I've been living on Daniel Island since 2010. I believe the county repaved it about 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And the city still has not been out there to repave. Some of the potholes have been filled, not all the potholes, and certainly the bridge, which was recently deemed to be structurally unsound. There's been a Band-Aid approach, which is let's put a steel plate on it, and then let's wait to see how we're going to address replacing that bridge. So those are issues that the city has certainly known about. The neighborhood association on Daniel Island has pushed for that particular issue. And my point is, we shouldn't have to wait for bridges to be structurally unsound before there's a plan to replace them. We shouldn't have to wait for our roads to be pocked full of potholes in order to repave those roads, especially when right across the city line and into the county, it's been repaved. Let's take the money from that tourism industry, the tourist dollars that I was talking about, and let's use some of that. I mean, the city collected, I believe, over $23 million from the tourism tax, which includes both your hospitality and your accommodations tax. So of that $23 million, let's spread that around the city and let's address some of those needs that, again, access the tourist venues, because that money can be used to pave roads, maintain roads, build bridges, things of that nature when they're accessing the tourist venues.
The steel plates, how many are those right now on Daniel Island on those particular areas that you just mentioned?
I believe there's only one. Or I'm sorry, there's only one, but it's 2 inches thick. And there's a sign when you're approaching that bridge that says, be aware, 2-inch thick steel plate. And when you cross the bridge, you see it. It's hard you're not going to miss it. Also, because of the bridge being structurally unsound, they have limited commercial vehicles on that particular stretch of road. So, and in addition to that, there's been a lot of talk about building a pedestrian and cycling walkway next to Daniel Island Drive to connect it to Plymouth Ferry. Of course, it would have to go over those two bridges as well, so the two creeks that are there. So, again, all of that can be accomplished if you have a plan in place and you can use the tourism dollars, the tax dollars from the hospitality and the accommodation tax to help fund that. Now, the bridge being replaced, now that's become more of an emergency situation. I mean, it needs to be replaced. So the city has to find funding for that as well. But we can also look at some of that funding from the tourist tax in order to build the bridge, repave the road, and make sure that there's the maintenance in place that serves those tourist venues.
Now, how much would that pedestrian bike pathway cost?
That I'm not sure of. It's been in the works for quite some time. I'm not sure if the city has done studies, but it's something that that needs to be finalized and obviously needs to be built. But I'm not sure what the exact dollar amount would be. I know that when the bridge was shut down, there was some commentary within the community about now would be a good time for the city to start looking into replacing that bridge and completing the bike path that's been discussed for a long time. And the response from the city was, the city engineers are looking into that. So maybe the city engineers will come up with a budget here shortly in terms of what it's going to cost to replace the bridges as well as build that bike and pedestrian walkway.
And I know one of the issues that you want to also focus on is really widening 526. Tell me, how do you start with that?
Sure. Now, it's important to note that widening 526 would not be a city project. That would be both a state and federal project. But I think until you make it a priority and someone is leading the charge on that, then it's never going to get off the ground. So what has to happen is I would work with our state representatives, our state senators. I would work with our federal congressional delegation. I would work with, U.S. Senator Tim Scott, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, Representative Cunningham, Representative Mace, State Senator Larry Grooms, as well as the entire Charleston and Berkeley County delegation to make that a priority. You look at the Ravenel Bridge. The Ravenel Bridge went from, in 1995, when the old Cooper River bridges were deemed structurally unsafe. Within 10 years, the Ravenel Bridge was built. Within 10 years. So when you have an individual like former Congressman Ravenel, who then became a state senator, pushing that issue and working with officials both at the state and the federal level, you can make these major infrastructure projects a reality. Now, the reason why 526 and Donhold Bridge needs to be replaced, or needs to be widened and then Donhold Bridge replaced, is all of the population coming to that side of Charleston is going to be on the Clements Ferry Road corridor. There's a major development, the Canehoy Plantation, that's being developed. It's approved for 18,000 homes. Now, I believe it's only going to be about 9,000 according to the developers. But that's still 9,000 new homes. Each new home, roughly 2 new cars per home. That's 18,000 more cars on the road coming onto Clements Ferry. Now, they only have one way to go. They can go to access downtown Charleston. They can go. They can take Clements Ferry to 41 and get on 17 and come down Mount Pleasant. So that's going to be more traffic on 17. Or they can take Clements Ferry down to 526. They're widening 526 right now, but they can make Clements Ferry an 8-lane road until they do something with that bottleneck there at the entrance of 526. All you're doing is rushing to a bottleneck, and you're never going to get ahead of that congestion there at 526 and Clements Ferry until you add a new exit ramp and you widen 526. We also saw when the Wando Bridge was shut down recently, the traffic problems that caused throughout the city. And those are the issues where you have to have a collaborative approach. You have to be willing to work with your state representatives, your state senators, as well as your federal elected officials to make sure that that project is given a priority. And I'll talk to anyone and everyone who will listen about the need for 526 to be widened and for the Donhold Bridge to be replaced. And sometimes if you just have someone who's willing to lead that charge and then talk to people and get their attention on it, and you focus on the need for it and why it has to occur in order to accommodate the growth, then you can get some movement. But ultimately, it does have to be a state and federal project.
You talk about growth. Where are we with that?
Well, overall, across Charleston, you can continue to see that it's growing every single day.
Okay.
The population is growing. More developments are being approved. There was an article in the Post and Courier that I believe 105,000 new homes have been approved in the metro area. So that's, of course, across the Tri-County area. But that's 105,000 new homes. Each one of those homes is going to bring new people. It's going to bring more cars to the area. So development continues to be an issue, and Charleston's a great place to be. And we have some good jobs, some manufacturing base,
Sure.
and the high-tech industry is here as well. So, we have to be able to accommodate that growth. And the growth is going to come. So we can't kid ourselves and say we can just stop the growth. The development is going to occur. But it's having a plan in place to make sure that the infrastructure is there when that development occurs. Again, you can look at Clements Ferry and the development that has occurred down the Clements Ferry corridor with the new neighborhoods.
Right.
And then the new neighborhood coming in, again, Cavewood Plantation, that's going to be 9,000 new homes. And there's no plan in place to address 526 or the Don Hope Bridge. Again, Clements Ferry is being widened, which is great once you get past those two bottlenecks.
Okay.
So the development is going to occur. And what we have to do as a city is look at responsible development and then make sure that the infrastructure is in place. Because once you build the development and the people and the vehicles come into those developments as they're being built, it's very challenging at that point for the infrastructure to catch up. And it becomes much more expensive for the infrastructure to catch up. So we just have to make sure that with the development, we have plans in place to make sure the infrastructure is also in place to accommodate that development.
Okay. And if you were to be elected on day one, what would you do first as councilman?
Day one, I would certainly talk to my colleagues about tackling those three priorities that I've made. Those three priorities are replacing the bridges on Daniel Island Drive and repaving that section of road. I want to replace the obsolete cameras that are located on the major intersections of Daniel Island. They're already there. The police utilize them, but they're just obsolete. We need to upgrade those with new technology and give our police officers the ability to fight crime. Because the chief of police has asked Daniel Island residents to register their cameras,
Sure.
so their security systems.
Right.
So if there is a crime, then the police are able to capture that video and then obviously have the tools necessary to identify potential suspects.
Right.
And then another project is the completion of the Wando public boat ramp or public boat ramp on the Wando River. That's a plan that, or a promise that the city has been working on for more than a decade. State Senator Larry Grooms has secured funding for that particular project. But for whatever reason, whenever the state and the city get close to an agreement, there seems to be a permitting problem. And I know Senator Larry Grooms has worked on this project. I've seen him do presentations at the Daniel Island neighborhood about this particular project, so I know it's important to him. So I will work with Senator Larry Grooms, who has already secured more than $1.2 million in funding for this particular project, to finally cut through the red tape, whatever's going on at City Hall, and make sure that the permits are given so the state resources can be allocated for this particular project. And then DNR, which also has a role in it, also can work on that project to make sure that we have a public boat ramp on Daniel Island, which is needed. You have the number of avid boaters on in that area, both not just on Daniel Island, but again up the Clements Ferry corridor. So the growth that has occurred in District 1 would certainly warrant this type of project moving forward, and the funding has been there. Senator Larry Grooms has secured it. Now we just have to make sure that on the city side, we cut through the red tape and that we get that project permitted and ultimately built.
What is the typical permitting process for something like this?
Well, in this one, because you have state agencies involved as well, DNR is there, so they have a role in it, and you're going to have, of course, the city with a role in it. So I know that there's some, give and take amongst the state agencies. Now, what are the specifics of those projects? I'm not sure. Just as a regular citizen,
Right.
I'm not privy to what happens behind the scenes, what happens at the state level. So I'm not sure how to answer that question in terms of the specifics, but I do know that when there are different bureaucracies involved, both the city and the state, it does take some collaboration. And again, this is another area to where if you're leading the charge, so to speak, if you're out front talking about it, and if you're making it an issue, and you're working with your state senator who already has made this a priority in terms of securing funding for it, then together you can get with the right state officials, and then you can make this project a reality.
Those obsolete cameras, how much would that cost the city of Charleston?
And again, that's a question that no one knows because it hasn't been studied. I mean, there's been no proposal put forth to replace those particular cameras. What needs to happen is those cameras replaced, and then to modern technology, and then the feed go to the police station.
Sure.
And then the police station obviously able to record those feeds. So if there is a crime at night, they can then utilize those feeds in order to identify any suspects. Late last year there was a breaking and entering into a home on Daniel Island. Early in the morning, some person in a ghillie outfit went into a home with a woman who was there. Her husband was outside. And then, she saw him,
okay.
And then he left the premises and then apparently left Daniel Island. But there's no recordings, as far as I know, of that particular individual. And the police who have been investigating it, Team 5, they do a great job investigating those crimes. I'm not sure if they have any suspects in place, but that's what I mean by those are the types of crimes to where there's only a few ways in or on and off Daniel Island, right? 526 and Plymouth Ferry.
Right.
So, and they already have cameras at those intersections. So again, this is just updating those cameras to give the police the resources that they need. I'm a former prosecutor in the United States Army. One of the areas that I prosecuted involved sexual assault cases, and I worked closely with police when, or the military police as well as the criminal investigative unit within the Army to make sure that they had the tools that they needed to accomplish the mission. And it's the same thing with the police. Team 5 would benefit from this. The chief of police has already put a call out to the citizens to register their cameras. So let's take it a step beyond and let's give them the tools that they need in order to properly investigate crimes that occur in that part of the city.
Shawn Pinkston, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
It's been a pleasure, Quintin. And for those of you watching, you can always find out more by going to ShawnPinkston.com. You can reach me anytime on my mobile, which is 843-817-4443. Shawn at ShawnPinkston.com is my email. And as well, there's a Facebook page where you'll get much more timely updates throughout the course of the campaign. But I look forward to meeting you soon. And if you ever have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to give me a call.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Quintin.
You're welcome.